Oh, I think we got in right when you said one there. I think might be a little bit late on that, but yes. It is the Patreon live stream.
Oh, I was gonna do a joke when we went live.
Oh, what was it?
I was gonna say or do something really, really embarrassing, and then be like, "Oh, we're live." Yeah, like I was gonna be like, "Oh man, my crotch is burning and itching today." That's the last time I accept a blowjob from that girl in the trucking lot, and we're on live.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, ruined it for you.
Yeah, that's okay.
My bad, Chris.
I'll do it next time. I'll do it next time.
Yeah, but you see, now you've told everyone ahead of time. So.
Yeah.
Yes, it is Theft Day in the U.S., also known as Tax Day to non-libertarians.
Yeah, legalized extortion.
If you haven't sent in your taxes, then it's too late unless you're in Alaska and Hawaii. I think you've got an hour if you're in Alaska, or I think a lot of the post offices might be staying open late anyway. I think some of them do that.
Yep.
All right. So before we were talking about
speaking of taxes, I was actually...
Oh, go ahead.
Well, speaking about tax day, I was actually going to mention this. I was watching a podcast by Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan, he's hit or miss, but he was doing a really good one where he was talking to a comedian and they were discussing the IRS, and one comedian brought up a pretty good point. A lot of people like to compare, well, how's the IRS any different between, like those companies that call you at 2 o'clock in the morning and say you owe them a credit card payment? Well, he said, well, here's the thing. Either sue you or they'll just freeze your credit, which, while bad, it's not damaging. The IRS, on the other hand, they will arrest you and take away all your freedom.
Yeah, they can put you in jail.
Yeah, a credit card company.
A gulag.
I think there's only 2 kinds of debtor's prison we have, and that's for taxes and child support. Those are the only 2 things I think you can go to jail for if all you do is owe money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was talking to child support with a friend before I came on here, and we were talking about this really tragic case where a guy was raped by a woman. She got impregnated by him, and she got the courts to successfully force him to pay child support.
Yep, because he was a biological father.
I don't have any witty remarks for that.
Yeah. I tell this to people all the time. Imagine if some guy, broke into a house and murdered somebody, and then, and then told the people, who of the murdered family, oh, by the way, you got to pay for my court fees. It's like, I agree. I agree with some people, unless it's voluntary, there should be no child support laws. It should all be money.
Well, it should be a civil thing, and it should be a lot more equitable than it is.
Yeah. And especially because, they're so relentless with some child support. There's plenty of cases we read about where, men are literally broke. They're bankrupt, they can't afford anything, and yet, the wife or ex-wife in most cases is still no, you still gotta pay, even if he submits, a balance sheet which says I have no money. It's like, nope, you still gotta pay me or you're going to jail. And it's like, well, what do you want me to do?
Well, child support, though, I absolutely get. I do not understand alimony.
Oh yeah, alimony.
If you're divorced and you're no longer together, why should one of you pay the other?
Yeah,
because you were married.
Yeah. Same thing with a lot of states that have the 50-50 rule, and you hear the story about, how the wife gets the car and the dog, even though she didn't pay for it. It's like give people what they paid for themselves. Don't say, okay, you were married, it's 50-50. No, it's like, okay, who paid, for this? Oh, the husband, okay, he gets that. Who paid for this? The wife, okay, she gets that. It should be like that.
I think it's different. Like if it's a car, and it probably depends on the state, but I think in North Carolina, if his name is the only one on the car, he keeps the car. It's only if it's a joint ownership that.
That's right. That's actually why a lot of financial consultants will always tell married couples, even if you're absolutely sure you're going to be married for the rest of your life, keep your accounts separate and all that just in case. Because trust me, if something happens and you do get divorced, it's going to be really, really messy in a divorce trial.
And I'm sorry, a joint checking account or any other kind of demand deposit that more than one person has access to, bad idea. Even without a divorce or anything like that, it's like, I've got a flat tire and I got to fix it. I'm going to write a check. And then at the same time, the spouse has this other thing. Oh, I'll just write a check for it. And one of them bounces.
Well, yeah.
That made you Warren Buffett.
In fact, actually, even some marriage counselors even flat out say don't get a joint, savings account, because one of the #1 causes of divorce is argument over money, and that's what can happen if you have a joint shared account. It might happen where, like, one guy needs money to fix his car, but the other one, wants like a new sofa and all that, and then the argument's going to be, why did you need a new sofa? What was wrong with the old one? We need my car fixed. And the other one's like, oh, come on, that car wasn't that bad. You didn't have to fix it. And then that's what happens, So the one spouse can pay for the car repair and the other one can pay for the sofa, and it's their expense and their expense only.
Yeah, and then you just work out the bills 50-50. That's what Heather and I do.
Yeah, Yeah, in all honesty, I don't want to sound like I'm blaming the victim or anything. Like, SJWs will contact, but and it goes back to that whole alimony thing. I see all these cases, where like one spouse murders the other because they don't want to pay alimony, and I'm just thinking,
executioner,
executioner in the chat.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, why do you need alimony anyway? If you think about it, there's a possibility that that whole situation could have been avoided if they didn't have to pay it,
Yeah.
I just don't understand why it exists to begin with.
Yeah.
That makes 3 of us.
But then again, that's what all laws are,
But
I've actually heard that's actually one of the reasons why divorces are so messy, is because a lot of the lawyers and private investigators that get involved in divorce, they make big bucks from it. That's why they have all these laws to make, divorce as messy as possible so they can get paid more. Yeah. Good for the lawyers and the...
Speaking of messy, some major cuckery is afoot in the city of brotherly love.
Oh, what's that?
TLDR, 2 black men were arrested in a Philadelphia Starbucks because they were just standing around.
Loitering is what they say.
Loitering.
Yeah, loitering means standing there. That's what it means when they say loitering is a crime. They mean it's a crime to stand there and do nothing.
Yeah.
That is literally a crime in some place.
Like here's the thing. I can understand, like, if they're standing in the store and not buying anything, in the store owner's like, okay, listen, buddy, you either buy something or you leave. But if you're outside the store, why bother?
Or if you're like obstructing an entrance or something like that.
Yeah. That's what loitering should. That's the only time when police, should be called, is if they're standing in there and being a pest, or if they're blocking the entrance. Then yeah, you can call the cops and lead them away. But if they're just outside, they're not doing anything, then fine. Yeah. Actually, and speaking of coffee, I saw a video about this one coffee shop in Oakland that actually bans uniformed officers on the premise. And I understand it's a private business and all that, but you know what I'm thinking? I actually told this to a friend of mine. It's like, okay, so you live
and Chris is
high crime rate. It's in California, which has really, really strict gun laws, and you don't allow uniformed police on the premises. Yeah, you might as well put up a giant neon sign that says, "Hey, robbers, burglarize us."
Yeah,
and soliciting is something else. I mean, if you're a property owner, of course, you can put up a sign that says no soliciting. Again, it's a crime in some places, and I think that was, I think I had this on the podcast that time. I got a parking ticket, and it listed all the offenses on the back of it and how much it was, and like soliciting. If soliciting was actually a bigger fine than discharging a firearm.
Oh yeah, speaking of which, I forgot. Yeah, you wanted me to talk about my firearms. Yeah, I own 7 of them: 3 handguns and 4 rifles. Funny, I'm not getting the urge to commit murder, or go shoot up a school. Well, what a ripoff! I want my money back.
I've actually never fired a handgun.
Oh really?
I fired all sorts of long guns. I fired rifles, shotguns. I even fired muzzle loader. I learned how to measure and pour the powder and everything.
Yeah.
A friend of mine in high school had a muzzle loader.
Yeah. The thing about handguns is that they're not as easy to aim and shoot as movies portray them. Like, you see the guy like, who shoots at the villain and it's point dead right between the eyes. It's real difficult to do that.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people are saying is why the AR-15 is so popular, especially among women, because you've got the long guns, so it's easy to aim. But contrary to what the news media will tell you, it's actually a very weak gun. I mean, you know, a 12 gauge shotgun will mess you up, but I mean,
you know, it's pretty. Yeah, there was actually
with the buckshot. But go ahead, Chris.
There was actually this really cool video that was in response to when Joe Biden said women don't need AR-15s, they just need a double-barrel shotgun and that's it. And then there was this side-by-side showing video of these small, frail women, you know, firing these powerful shotguns, and they were getting knocked over. They were getting scope-eyed, but then they showed them firing, you know, M16 style weapons, and they were firing them with little to no effort. You know,
they're basically 22s with a bunch of powder behind them. That's what they are, and they're very little recoil. So I mean, it's because the problem is, you know, you shoot and then you have the recoil and then you have to get your sights back on. But that's actually why, because I saw a documentary about the M16. That's why the M16 was so revolutionary when it came out, was because it debunked a common myth that a lot of militaries had, was that in order to get a real man-stopper, you have to have this big, you know, full charged rifle caliber. But Eugene Soner and company demonstrated that no, you actually can get the same effect with smaller caliber ammunition, you know. An Executioner in the chat wants to know what type of muzzleloader. This was in high school. This was, you know, 30 some years ago. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, then this is something else. I mean, I think the gun grabbers just get everything from the movies. But I mean, I've read cases like in combat, you know, even with an actual assault rifle, a lot of times they'll put 10, 20, 30 bullets into someone or even more, and they're still coming at them because something like 95% of targets on the body are non-lethal.
Yeah, that is the biggest myth that a lot of people will always say, and it's especially when they talk about, you know, the whole AR-15 versus AK-47, which is, you know, they say, oh, the AK-47 has more stopping power because the 7.62 Soviet is bigger than the 223 Remington. But the truth is, and I've actually heard this from actual combat soldiers, when you're in the middle of combat, you know, you're being so pumped up with adrenaline. Like, there's many cases where people get shot, stabbed, or hit with shrapnel, and they don't even know it until they look down and see they're stained with blood, and sometimes they even mistaken it for the enemy's blood.
Yep.
An Executioner says the 5.56 is not great. You can hit someone in the head and they might not go down.
Like I said, it's like one step above a 22.
Yeah.
You know? That's why a lot of people like shotguns for home defense, because they have the stopping power, but they also spread the shot out, so it's less likely that they'll over penetrate and run into walls or other people, or, you know, and do other damage.
5.56 is not great. You can hit someone in the head and you may not go down. Yeah. I can link you to a few videos that debunks that story. That's another story, though, is that the 5.56 has no stopping power. Actually, it does some pretty nasty damage. You know, I mean, again, stopping power as a whole is myth, but just because a round is smaller than another, that doesn't mean it's big. That doesn't mean doesn't do damage.
Did I just have the chat running up the whole time again?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of my ugly mug.
Yeah.
Hey, you're not that ugly. It's just a beard.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. But you can't have a beard, Shane. Beards are a symbol of masculinity, and being masculine promotes the patriarchy.
Yeah. Where did the screen share go?
Yeah. Yeah,
get that fogosity out of here.
Tell me something. Every time you see someone who doesn't have a beard, like an actor or whatever, and then you see them with a beard, has there ever been a guy who has looked less good with a beard than without? I haven't found one.
Yeah. Speaking of promoting patriarchy, apparently a lot of, you know, third wave feminists are going after cargo shorts now because cargo shorts are a sign of the patriarchy. Yeah.
I did a response, David R., to that. It's called Silencing the View, when they were talking about silencers, and I went and all that. Yeah. I even played audio that I got from another YouTube channel of suppressed AR-15 being fired, and it's amazing how loud it still is, you know, even after being silenced, because I think like ordinarily, and I mean, guns vary, but it's something like 165 decibels without the suppressor, which is enough to damage your hearing.
Yeah.
The suppressor takes it down to like 120, 125. And here's the thing about the decibel scale. It's logarithmic. Every 10 decibels is 10 times the pressure. So a 40 decibel drop is actually 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. It's 1/10,000th the pressure, so it's a lot easier on your ears. It protects your hearing, but it's still louder than a jackhammer.
And speaking of guns, did you guys hear the story about that? I forgot his name, but there was that one student who woke up from a coma, from a coma after he was injured in the Parkland shooting, and he was actually asked, like, what's your opinion about gun control? And he flat out said, I do not blame the NRA for what happened. If anything, the sheriff's department should be blamed because, as we pointed out, they had a couple officers on the premises who were armed and more than capable of taking on the shooter, but the sheriff said, no, you got to hold on and wait for SWAT.
Exactly.
And then of course, the sheriff was like, it wasn't my fault. They did what they were told to do. Yeah, and 17 children got killed as a result.
There are at least 3 students that I've seen from that school who say that they're pro-gun and anti-gun control, and they want to speak out about it, and the news media just keeps ignoring them. According to the news media, every single student there wants gun control, and it's not true.
Yeah, I've actually heard that. David Hogg and that one chick, I forgot her name, want gun control.
Emma Gonzalez.
Who, by the way, she admitted she bullied the shooter in the past. She said, I think she said something along the lines of, he was a loser back then and he's a loser now, they're referring to the shooter. And I'm like,
and like you point out something like that, well, doesn't she do that? They go, you're victim blaming. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. Let's think about this. You're saying we need to consider mental health issues with stuff like that. And yet you're saying that the people who actually contributed to that don't have any of the blame?
I will say one thing I like about, the TV show American Dad is that in a way Seth MacFarlane has to force, to think in the opposite view. And I saw one episode, it was the earlier episodes about guns, and his daughter Haley's all guns kill people. You know what he does? He takes a Glock, he loads it fully, and he puts a barrel in the chamber, puts it on the table, and says, "Okay, gun, kill. Go ahead, kill someone. No one's stopping you." Guess what the gun did? Nothing. People. Guns.
Had a recent video about that. It was like, "Oh, these AR-15s. They go, okay, this is AR-15." Points another gun at it. Now you better not do anything.
Yeah, guns are mechanical devices, people. They're not living beings. They don't have a brain to commit murder. They're just mechanical devices.
Well, that's the problem with that stupid cat video where it's like, the analogy is we don't want to ban all cats. We want to ban, the really big, dangerous ones like panthers. And it's like, wait a minute. Cats have autonomy. They are able to act on their own. Guns can't.
Yeah, I hate it when people do that. They compare like an animal to an AR-15, and I just want to say, people, machines and living creatures are 2 different things.
Yeah, I call that stupidity.
Oh yeah, it's very.
But then again, everything's stupid. Is stupid.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't want to pull a Godwin's rule or anything, but I will admit that was so funny when David Hogg was wearing that armband and he raised his right fist in the air and like, look, I'm not trying to pull a Godwin's law, but did he not think about how that would look, to a media post? I mean, seriously, there's actual coaches who train presidential candidates and they flat out tell them, you got to avoid, using certain hand gestures and all that because it could be misinterpreted as someone. Like there was one. Like I read there was one politician who got accused of doing a Nazi salute because he had his, right hand in the air when it turns out he was just waving at someone, but it still goes to show, you got to be careful.
Yeah, but it's like they caught him mid-wave and they were able to catch this frame that's right in the middle.
Yeah.
When his hand was... I was trying to show it, but I'm not... Hang on, I'll show it. And where's my camera? I got to get my camera back.
Don't go tempting fate, Shane.
All right.
But
okay, I don't know what happened to my camera.
Like again, I'm not trying to pull Godwin's law, but I would love to ask David Hogg, did you not think about that, To
be fair, David Hogg doesn't think much at all. He's just a useful idiot for the gun grabbers and the state.
Oh yeah. I remember when he was demanding a boycott and all that, and it later backfired because even though some of the big corporations, pulled, their funding from the NRA, the donations to the NRA skyrocketed, and then, he starts whining and crying.
Then again, patience is clearly delusional, Chris. He needs to be locked up for 90 days and given proper medication. Not out here messing with the well-adjusted population like me, you, or Shane.
But people misunderstand Godwin's law. It's not any time you mention the Nazis. It's specifically when you call your opponent a Nazi or compare him to
that's a thing. Yeah, that's another thing. People get, people get wrong about Godwin's law. Especially when I actually sometimes get this, from communists and all that. When I love to compare, communists, policy and execution to the Nazis, then they say, quit pulling a Godwin's law. And it's like, no. Pulling a Godwin's law would be like me saying, you disagree with me, you're a Nazi. Whereas if I say, here's how your policy is similar to what the Nazis did, Yeah,
I mean, if you're doing a valid comparison, like, we do with the gun control debate, all right, look at what the Nazis did with their gun management. If you were a proper Aryan and a member of the Nazi party, you could own guns. If you were a Jew,
that's what I love is when people say, oh, Adolf Hitler didn't ban guns. In fact, he limited guns. He lowered the waiting period and he lowered the age. And then I looked up at the law and it is true. And guess what? It only applied to Nazi party members.
And that's something I don't get, because they were saying, that he loosened gun laws because the Weimar Republic pretty much had almost a universal ban on guns. And so really all you're saying is that Hitler did less than the Weimar Republic, but how is that relevant?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And here's the thing. We actually have testimonies from actual people who grew up in Nazi-occupied territories, and they did say, they did go after the guns. When the Nazis took over, they were instructed to surrender any weapons, any military weapons, like whether they be rifles or whatnot, you had to the nearest military outpost. If not, you would be treated as a member of the resistance and executed.
Yep. Which is what they did in Australia, except for the execution part. But, they were saying, 1996 wasn't a ban. It was just a buyback. No, it was a buyback with penalties if you continued to possess a gun.
Which is exactly what happened in Deerfield, Illinois.
Yeah.
Which is about a few hours north from where I am.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that, I get so tired of explaining it over and over again. In fact, Toma I think that's how you pronounce his name, on our Discord group, he's from, I love it when he points out, everyone says, oh, the U.S. has too many gun laws, and that's why they're shooting up the place. And he's like, look at the Czech Republic. We are number 2 in the terms of amount of gun ownership, and yet how come you don't hear about mass shootings in Prague?
And here's an interesting thing I found out recently about Australia. It's that because you can get a gun, it's just really difficult and you got to jump through a bunch of hoops. But at this point, more people in Australia own guns today than they did before the Port Arthur massacre.
Oh yeah, And not to mention, here's another thing. Many Australians have actually said this, that Australia doesn't even really enforce. A lot of people love to say, well, how come Australia's free even though they have all these laws and regulations? And some people have said that's because Australia really only enforces the law in the big major cities. If you live in a town in the outback, they don't really give a rat's ass, because they're not going to send the national police 300 miles, into the outback, to enforce a law in a small town.
But we've covered, like, I think Sydney and Canberra doing things like, say, if it's against the law if you do anything even remotely fun.
I wouldn't go there for the life of me, mate.
Back when Reason TV.
You keep dropping out, Chris. I'm not sure what the issue is, but you keep dropping out.
Oh, well, I was saying, can you hear me now, guys?
Yeah,
okay.
But it's
temporary. It just goes out for a second and then comes back.
Yeah. Well, as I was saying, I think when Reason TV was still doing their month, the Sydney local government got that because basically they were banning anything that was fun. They were banning serving alcohol after 9 o'clock. They had a curfew. It's like, and I like how there were so many comments saying, "Oh, listen here, what you went out past curfew. That's it, Australia citizens. You go to your room and you think about what you did. You're grounded for the rest of the week." Yeah. What's next? What's next? Are they gonna mandate that we have to eat a bar of soap if we say the F word on live TV?
Don't give them ideas.
Don't tempt fate, Chris.
Well, yeah, because it's the slippery slope. You know, it starts out with soap in the mouth, then it's a spanking, and then it's prison time. Yeah. And going back to the whole gun thing, you know, I mean, as you pointed out on the podcast, that's why we don't want even, you know, quote unquote reasonable gun laws.
Why does Google keep censoring Chris?
It starts
he
out
just
with,
wants to talk.
Yeah, it's Google's fault.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's like, you know, I mean, it starts out with, oh, we don't want to ban AR-15s. We just want to ban those 30-round magazines so you can only use 10 rounds to, oh, let's shrink it to 5 rounds, and they do that. It's like, you know what, let's get rid of the AR-15 altogether. They're already doing that.
I think one of these months I need to give, I think it's called Jitsi a try, because it's supposed to work a lot better than this. The only thing is I think I'll have to install an encoder to get it to broadcast on YouTube. But
yeah.
Apparently with this, instead of going through a central server, it just sends the audio and video directly to everyone. So, I mean, I'd get it straight from you without a server mangling it up.
Yeah. Well, you cut out too, Shane. So, oh man, David Stewart's not in the chat room. That's sad. I would have loved to talk to him.
Yeah, DJ Arms is there.
Yeah.
Dublin's Law.
With a
Just
Marvel
remember,
reference.
if you're not Antifa, then you must be a Nazi. Hail Hydra.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I call Hydra the biggest jokes in the comic book universe.
Yeah. You know.
Because I should just sit back, point, and laugh at them. Ha 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 ha. That sounded really fake.
Yeah. You know, I mean,
than David Hogg
I do.
What? Dessert?
You know, I do agree with you, Shane. You know, the biggest, problem with writing villains, especially, even with cartoons, is that they always have to make the villain, a mustache twirler and all that, and they never give him a reason. It's like, it's like there has to be a reason for a character's behavior. Otherwise, it's just going to be stupid. Like a good example, there was one video game for The Legend of Spyro, which was a reboot of the old Spyro the Dragon games, and one of the villains was Malefor, and his ultimate plan was the Great Cleansing, and he wanted to destroy the world. The problem is that there was no reason for that, and I actually saw a parody that one time where it says, what if he succeeded? And he's like, yes, I destroyed the world! And he's floating on a little rock, and he's looking around, he's like, what do I do now?
Hey, don't go dissing anyone who sounds like the Joker.
Yeah.
I wrote a short film I'd love to get produced. This one's kind of involved, though. We probably couldn't do it on the little no-budget thing we've been doing. But what I noticed after the first draft was I went looking through and like, wait a minute. There are no bad guys in this script. There's conflict, and there's people working it, but everyone in the script is doing the right thing based on the information they have.
I never understood the logic of limited bullets.
Fun fact, the guy at the Parkland shooting, he didn't have a high-capacity magazine. He just had a bunch of 10-round magazines on him.
I never understood what's the big deal with cutting off a barrel.
Yeah.
People reducing the muzzle velocity. That's all.
Many people have. Yeah. And it's pretty funny because, a lot of people like to say, well, we need to ban high-capacity magazines, and like a good example would be the Aurora shooting. Everyone said the Aurora shooting, needed to end because, the guy had one of those 100-round drum magazines. But what they don't tell you was that it jammed halfway through and he ditched it and went to using his pistols. Everyone has point in many gunners.
Yeah, he only got like 15 or 20 rounds out of that, didn't he?
I think it was slightly more than that, but still it jammed halfway through. That's the thing. Drum rounds, they're very fun to use on the range, but for combat-wise or for combat purposes, they are extremely unreliable.
Which is why they don't give them to infantry.
Yeah, that's actually why
they give the straight clip mags to the GIs on the field.
They didn't have the drum round because they were heavy and they were just prone to jamming.
I think that's the idea behind the P90, because that's a funny looking gun. It's basically a rectangle with holes cut out. But I mean, it occurs to me that if you're infantry and you're crawling around everywhere, there's less sticky outy parts to get caught on things and break off. So
it's. And
come on, the P90 design wise is badass looking, Shane. I don't know what planet you're living on.
And going back to villains without
it just doesn't look like what you think a gun should look like.
Yeah. And I was about to say, going back to poorly, motivated villains, it's not a Chris live stream without us talking about Star Wars, but that's why I hate the new Star Wars movies. There is no logic or reasoning behind, either the First Order or the Resistance. There's no logic or reasoning behind. Yeah.
It's a real challenge with short films, which is why I'm glad I've been doing them, because you don't have a whole lot of time for character development to really try and sit and explain things. So you have to leave a lot of it ambiguous, but you have to do it and still in a way that makes them believable.
Yeah. And here's another thing. And here's another thing when I like to compare, the original Star Wars Expanded Universe with the Disney one. A lot of people, are saying, well, look, there's Disney books coming out that are explaining the plot holes. To which I say, well, here's the thing. In the original Expanded Universe, there was books and all that, but they were written because people wanted to know what happened, because the original trilogy was good. They wanted to know, what did Luke Skywalker? Did he successfully, create the Jedi Order? What did the rebellion do after they defeated the Empire? It's because we wanted to know that. Disney's making these books because everyone's saying, wait a minute, what happened between the films? Why did the New Republic not go after the First Order? What's going on? So they have to say, we don't have time to make a movie, so here, just buy our book.
And John, I think we're hearing a dog in the background on your
That's just my doggo. He barks like that sometimes.
Might just want to mute your mic when you're not talking, though.
But yeah, you get where I'm coming from, Shane, right? It's like, an expanded universe and lore should happen because people want to know more, not because you need to fix something.
Oh, I went ahead and bought Stephen Moffat's novelization that he just released, Day of the Doctor, which was the 50th anniversary Doctor Who special. Okay, that book is hilarious. It's easily one of the best of the Target novels that I've read so far. I mean, and it's stuff like all the chapters are out of order because it's time travel and no one knows what order to tell it in. But also, he is throwing in a lot of extra stuff that just makes it make even more sense, with the continuity and how it, applies to other Doctors. He even explains why the first two Doctors are in black and white. He says his first two incarnations were colorblind.
Cool.
Also, Forum is in the chat.
Yeah. Hey, Angry
from Moon. I don't know.
From Moon. Yeah.
Moon.
Snoke's evil because he's evil. Yeah, they never explain what happened to Snoke, and that's another thing I hate about The Last Jedi, because I have seen clips of it. I'm not gonna say
that movie.
I'm not John. I'm not gonna say RJ's full name, but yeah, hint, hint, people. Johnny really hates Rian Johnson.
Yeah.
Triggered.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, that's just the thing. It's like he was like, I mean, my personal opinion from what I get is that he was trying to surprise people by our expectations, because a lot of people had expectations for The Last Jedi, but here's the thing, he did it totally wrong, because instead of, thinking of something unique and different, he said, all those things, you were expecting, yeah, I threw them all in the garbage. It's like
Froman, think Afro man but Scottish. Froman, like that.
Yeah. Froman, yeah. Hey, Foreman, are you black though? Because you can't have an afro unless you're black. Otherwise, you're culturally appropriating people.
No, I think.
And all the SJWs are culturally appropriating my sanity.
Even though afros, just like with dreadlocks, have been around in many cultures. I mean, everyone knows, the infamous Jew fro.
I mean, you can't have every single hairstyle come naturally out of your head. Yeah. Oh, fros are natural. Oh, dreadlocks are natural. They just come out like that. They're two completely different things.
Yeah, especially in that one BuzzFeed video, and that one girl's like, "This is the hair I was naturally born with, so you wearing that as a fashion trend is not cute." And I'm like, lady, when you were born, you were almost completely bald.
And hair with African people does not grow out in dreadlocks.
Yeah, as you
form them over a period of months.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, dreadlocks weren't even popular in Africa until the late 1940s, when the king of Ethiopia started wearing them, and then there was a radical version of Afro Christianity called Rastafarian that was founded in his honor.
Yeah, and the only culture that has had dreadlocks consistently since antiquity is India.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, you go back to antiquity, you know, the Celts had them, you know,
Yep.
the prehistoric Germans had them. Pretty much everyone had them.
Yeah, you know, and you know, and it's, you know, cultural appropriation
is cancer.
Bad wars and conflicts, you know.
Hey, you really dropped out there, so I'm going to need to say
I
I
had to finish your sentence for you, Chris.
I was saying, cultural appropriation in the past is partially why we had so many conflicts and why nations would go to war with each other every 10 years. You know, it's because, you know, they were all saying, hey, you can't do that. We can only do that. And it led to conflicts, you know.
Yep.
I mean, there's really stupid cultural appropriation. It was like, here's a fun fact, you know, I mean, a lot of people love to drink a glass of, some people who like alcohol like champagne. Guess what? You can't call your alcohol champagne unless it's made in Champagne, France. It can be the exact same thing. You make it the exact same way using the exact same ingredients and techniques, but because it's not made in Champagne, French, it's not champagne.
But yet, hamburgers don't have to come from Hamburg.
Yeah. I actually saw a joke like that one time where a guy's doing that with a French guy, and you know the French guy is like, if it's not made in France, it is not real champagne. And he's like, okay, so champagne uses this type of grapes, right? Correct. And you also mix it with, you know, juices from, I don't know if it was like an olive or something. Correct. And I all did that. I aged it appropriately, and it's the exact same thing as the champagne from French. Correct. So how come it's not champagne? Because it doesn't come from France. That's yeah.
The French censored Chris. Doggone it.
Yeah.
Why is everybody after you?
Yeah, it's just... By the way, going back to wine, this is just a little thing, you know, and this is one of the few times where Adams Ruins Everything actually did something right. The whole thing about wine tasting, it's bull crap. You know, they've always talked about how, oh, you can tell this one wine by sniffing the cork, but they've literally done tests where they just took one random bottle of white wine, added some purple food coloring to it to give it, you know, like the red wine look, and like all these guys were saying, oh yeah, it comes from Naples, Italy, year 3, I think. And then they tell them, by the way, we just bought that bottle of wine, put some food coloring in it. We bought it from a gas station. We don't know where it comes from.
And it was the same wine in each glass, yeah.
Yeah, it was the same wine, just with different food colorings added. So
hello, Simon Petrikoff in the chat. Yeah, I think Adam gets most things right. Probably, you know, 2/3 to 3/4.
Yeah,
you know, I'd like him to have a higher rate.
He's terrible when he's talking about economic issues, though.
Well, I mean, he even got some stuff that, you know, if he even just called up any expert, like when he said bonobos were more closely related to humans than chimpanzees, it's like, their common ancestor branched off after they branched off from the line coming to humans, so they're equally distant from us evolutionarily speaking.
I think
the biggest misconceptions about alpha male is. Oh, are you talking or Shane?
No, you just cut out there for a second.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, well, I was about to say, he clearly in that episode did not understand what an alpha male is. Contrary to popular belief, the alpha male isn't the one that's going around being all aggressive. In fact, if you talk to an actual animal expert, the ones that are going around, you know, being all aggressive, they tend to be on the lower end of the hierarchy. The more dominant alphas, they don't need to be aggressive unless they absolutely have to. They can walk around and all the animals just submit to them. You know what I mean?
Here's what got me about that episode. The way he described an alpha male is exactly how his character behaves in every single episode.
Yeah, you know, I mean, that's what people say. Alpha males aren't these guys that go around and be aggressive and beat their chests and drag their woman and all that. They're confident, you know, and all that. And there was actually a special one time where they were discussing the concept of alpha male, and they did a little experiment where they hired a bunch of men, and the guy who was dubbed the most alpha wasn't aggressive. He was just, as I pointed out, like, he was just one of those people where, like, you know, he was so confident in himself that people were just naturally letting him lead them a little bit, you know, just like that. You know, an alpha male doesn't need to act. He just needs to assert himself.
Well, and I mean, if you look at dogs and you see, you know, one of the more dominant dogs, and then you have one of the younger dogs playing with it, you know, the alpha dog is very cool about it, and he'll pretend to let the younger dog win and stuff like that.
Yeah. And that's another thing I really love was that one guy is when they tried to use that one guy, who said, by the way, the guy who invented the concept of alpha males, he later regretted it because he found out, oh, wait a minute, they weren't being alphas, they had children and families, but several animal.
You cut out again there,
Chris.
Chris.
To reproduce. Oh, I was about to. Yeah, I was saying, the guy who coined the term alpha male, he regretted it, saying, oh, but I was wrong. Alpha males aren't alpha because they're in charge. They were acting that way because of their parents. And a lot of animal experts have pointed out, yeah, well, in the wild, especially with pack-based animals, who usually gets to have children?
Well, and he really got both of it wrong, because it's true he was looking at them in captivity, and it doesn't quite work that way in the wild. But he was acting like it's all familial in the wild, and it is. And if anything, it's a little more of a gerontocracy. And I mean, you always have the issue of when a dog comes into a new pack of trying to find out where that new dog goes into the pecking order. And so that dog will come in and challenge the others so they can all figure out, where he is in that pecking order. And then after that, everyone's cool.
Yeah. The attitude that alpha males are aggressive, like you said, that only happens if you take a previous alpha and put him in a different pack, because then, he's going to try to see, okay, am I going to be an alpha in this pack, or am I going to have to swallow my pride and be a lesser? And that's what happens, And
evolutionarily speaking, it's all about who is best able to defend the pack from attack from the outside.
Yeah. Contrary to popular belief, there's not like a single, alpha in a wolf pack. There's often many of them, but still they all exhibit the same behavior and all that, Well,
and it's not like the alpha is in charge of everything, and they might even have more than one dog in the pack being alpha in different situations.
Yeah, it's
doggone it.
Chris's internet sucks.
Yep, it does.
Mine should be better. I updated and I got it was the same price actually, so cool of Charter, but it's now 100 megabits down and 12 megabits up instead of just 4 megabits
I think the reason why my internet cuts off is because I have to do these live streams on my laptop, because for whatever reason my main computer, it uses Firefox, and Firefox doesn't like Google Hangouts, and when I try to use Google Chrome, there's always some sort of issue going on that I can't update it so it can allow Google Hangouts, so I'm screwed.
What kind of issue?
I don't know. It's like I try to open it, but it displays nothing no matter how hard I try. It's like, oh, won't display. It always says failure to display even when I update everything.
What operating system?
Windows 10.
Have you tried Chromium?
10. I don't know.
Chromium, for those who don't know, is the open source browser that Chrome is based on. And Google maintains Chromium. There's I think the Brave browser is built on Chromium. So you might want to give Chromium a try. And that's what a lot of people have found if Chrome just hasn't worked for them or whatever. Yeah. Chromium being a subset of the features usually tends to work a little better.
By the way, the spring snowstorm knocked out my VPN connection. So now all my hentai and world domination plans can be viewed by the FBI.
How did hold on. How did it knock out a VPN connection?
I don't know.
Don't let me. I'm not the VPN expert.
I don't know. In the middle of nowhere, it just suddenly said cannot connect to VPN, and I got disconnected.
Don't let me.
You try a different server?
It wasn't my fault.
Yeah, I've been trying, but like I said,
what VPN service do you have?
The one you recommended, that
FoxPN. Yeah, they've got servers all over the place.
Yeah, I'm gonna try a different server. Yeah,
I actually have the best luck with the one in Toronto, believe it or not, because even though there are some closer ones like Atlanta, New York, things like that, and even though they're a bit faster, it just seems like when I connect to the one in Toronto, it just works better, and I get
I'll have to take that advice, because I usually use the Atlanta server and all that, and it's it'll work fine with YouTube, but when I try to go onto Google or some other sites, it'll say failure to connect and all that. So
where are you located?
Well, I'm in Wisconsin, so try
one in Canada.
Yeah.
Try Toronto.
Yeah.
I mean, Toronto is just like, I think it's almost America, isn't it? Like just on the other side of.
Yeah, it's the most American city in Canada. to the point where some people actually think Toronto is an American, city. I actually saw a joke like that one time where people went to Canada and they figured out, wait a minute, Toronto's in Canada, not America. To which the Canadian says, yeah, but don't beat yourself up. We make that same mistake too. Yeah.
Well, considering that the Canadian Prime Minister is a soy-drinking, illegitimate son of Fidel Castro.
Yeah.
What? It wouldn't be a John Peterson live stream without a good quip.
Justin Trudeau's a soy boy. Yeah.
Yeah. Or a pop culture reference.
Yeah. Thanks to Paul Joseph Watson, I have to call people like that soy boys now. Yeah,
it's okay. It's good that you're picking up on the vernacular, Chris.
Yeah, it turns out that contrary to what a lot of vegans will say, soy's not all that good for you in large quantities.
Yeah,
well, I mean, it's a plant. It's a plant. Generally, it's good to have a high proportion of plants in your diet.
Yeah,
but yeah, these guys do like soy everything, and it's like
it's like
That's the same thing about like kale and acai berries and stuff like that. Kale, I mean, it's a green leafy vegetable. That's good. But it's not any better for you.
Character in Dragon Ball Super.
It's not any better for you than spinach or romaine lettuce. And acai berries aren't even as nutritious as strawberries. And yet they're supposedly these superfoods that get you everything and people go crazy over them.
Yeah. By the way, Shane, I actually destroyed a vegan with this one time, and they were talking about factory farming and they were showing videos, about, pigs,
Dropped out again.
I'm gonna Google.
How cruel and inhumane this is, and I'm like, okay, so swiftly and as painlessly as possible, a pig getting its neck snapped is cruel and inhumane, but a bunch of wild dogs ripping an animal apart and eating out its organs while it's still alive is all natural.
Wait, that's what they do. Like if you have the animal rights people who try to free the animals that are used in for makeup products, it's like, well, okay, let's think about this. You're a ferret or something like that. You've got this, 2-inch by 2-inch area of fur shaved off and they've put some stuff on it. And yeah, it's kind of irritated, but you're warm, you're fed, you don't have to do anything. Then the animal rights people come you and set you free. Now you're out. Now you're being attacked by everything. Now all of your skin hurts. You might even die. It's hard to get food.
And that's why we labeled PETA Idiot Extraordinaire in my debut.
Yeah, actually, something like that happened in England one time where the British branch, I think it was of PETA, broke into a textile company and released all their minks and all that because they were using them to make clothing and fabric. And the minks, they didn't go off and live wild and free and sing Hakuna Matata. They went on a rampage in the town. They were killing, local animals. They were contaminating, water wells and crops with their fecals and urine. And eventually the people were so pissed off that they started hunting them and killing them.
Here's a fun fact. When the animal rights people go and do stuff like that to set the animals free, they have to poke the animals with sticks to get them to charge out because they don't want to leave. They just occasionally just kind of stay there.
Yeah,
the animals don't want to go.
I thought you were talking about the metal band. My bad.
Yeah, and it's one thing I also love to talk to vegans about is, they always talk about how every sentient animal deserves the right to live, to which I say, and plants don't count. I mean, there's been scientific studies that shows that plants are, nowhere near sentient as like an animal is, but they're semi-sentient. Well, how come that doesn't count? And I had this one argument with this one vegan, and all that, and I was pointing that out, and I said, it's been shown that plants do have some minor sentience. They do react to external stimuluses. In fact, their cells give off reactions that are very similar to our nerve cells. And guess what? He replied? He said, "No, that's intelligence, not sentience. There's a difference."
Yeah, people don't know what sentience means. When they say sentient, they generally mean sapient, which is different. There are lots of
between
animals, and even some plants, like you said, that have some degree of sentience. Even like flatworms have some degree of sentience. But so far as we know, only humans are sapient.
Yeah, it's like, you know, I mean, actually, John David Stewart brought this up in one of his videos when he was reviewing Ferdinand. He says the thing I don't like that he doesn't like about it when we try to anthropomorphize animals is that we try to make them too human, and as consequence, you know, some little kids, you know, don't want to eat meat or something because they're afraid. Oh, but I don't want to kill Ferdinand. To which, and he's like saying, look, you got to teach your kids that that's not how animals behave in the wild. That's a movie. It's a story.
Or at least have one of them get soup like 16 times.
DJ Arm
Come on, you guys knew I was going to reference Cena's wrestling. Come here. Admit it.
DJ Arm 67 talks about, you know, this is from an episode of Penn and Teller Bullshit. You know, give the animal the same rights as human. And Penn says, up, the bull took a dump indoors. Cuff the bull, Teller.
Yep. Oh, yeah. They pointed. Yeah. Penn said that, you know, with rights come responsibilities. And if we were to let all the animals free and give them the exact same, you know, legal equality as we would, they'd all be in animal prisons for pooping, peeing, fucking, and killing each other.
I like the way Tim Slagle put it. He says, you know what? When the animals publish a newspaper, I won't ban it.
Yeah.
I will support the right of any animal to worship whatever religion he or she chooses.
Yeah. You know what this also reminds me of? It reminds me of those people that think that dolphins have superpowers, you know, and they're like, yeah, but look at it. But if you look at, you know, those people who train with dolphins, you know, they react and respond to all these commands and all that, to which I want to say, well, yeah, so does my dog, but I don't think my dog has secret psycho powers.
Yeah, they are pretty intelligent. I mean,
wait until your dog does a psycho crusher, then tell me about that.
Yeah.
And they've been observed, like discovering how to, you know, use a makeshift tool and teaching other dolphins about it. But there's a limit to it. And there was one I was really disappointed with Brian Cox, not the actor, like you were mentioning earlier, the scientist at CERN. And he was doing this one documentary on TV, and he was totally taken in by, oh, look, you know, the dolphin. It was one of the, it was a Clever Hans type of thing where the dolphin can like tap the number of times on the thing. It was like, okay, Brian, you're a skeptic. You should know this. Try it without either you or the trainer knowing how many dots are on each board.
Yeah.
But he didn't do that. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I mean, that's the thing. You know, I mean, going back to the whole sentient thing, you know, the truth is that the overwhelming majority of animals in the wild, yeah, they have some degree of intelligence, but it's not like, you know, human intelligence where we learn it. Whereas animals, it's more operant conditioning response. You know, it's more the dog or the animal.
There's a continuum in between, and there have been a lot of animals like elephants and dolphins and things like that actually show, you know, some human-like capabilities in that regard.
And by the way, as one marine biologist pointed out, you know, dolphins are smart, but it's nowhere near on the same level as octopuses.
Oh, octopuses are really smart.
Yeah, it's shocking to see how intelligent cephalopods are.
You know why they're so intelligent? They think it's because of their eyesight. When our eyes evolved, they evolved from nerve cells, which means that our light-sensitive cells on our retina are there in the wrong direction, which means that the blood vessels have to go over top of it. And if you were to see what your eyes actually see, you've basically got one clear spot in the middle and everything else is murky and dark. And so we need this huge visual cortex to process all of that. With octopuses, their eyes developed from skin cells. So their light sensitive cells are there in the right direction. They don't need much of a visual cortex. Their brain size, a greater proportion of their brain size can be devoted to intelligence.
Thanks to the Japanese, octopuses will forever be associated with hentai.
Or food.
Now I'm getting hungry again.
I tried calamari.
Chris and Gartner.
I tried calamari once, and no thanks.
From what I've heard, it's a very bland meat that doesn't really taste like anything, and
it was bland and tough.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the thing is that the reason why a lot of people complain that Asian food tends to be bland or something is because in Asia, texture is considered much more important than taste. That's why they eat things that don't have much of a flavor to it, but they eat it anyway because it's got a unique texture and they love texture.
Well, I mean, that can be not. That's why I like scallops, because they don't have much of a taste, but they have a nice texture to them, and you know, you dip them in a little bit of
Shane.
You dip them in a little bit of shrimp sauce.
Making me hungry.
Yeah, but yeah, octopus. Yeah, they pwn the dolphins in terms of learning and intelligence. I mean, octopuses have been,
and he's gone.
Octopi, what they learned, and there was even one incident where it was found out that some octopi can carry grudges because there was an incident. I think it was at like an aquarium or something where a janitor, you know, while he was cleaning, he upset the octopi for some reason. I don't know what it was, and it would always squirt ink whenever he was in the premise. Well, he later retired. And months later he came back, and that same octopi saw him, and it squirted ink at him.
By the way, octopi is not a proper suffix with that. It's Greek, not Latin. So,
well, yeah. There's
Greek plural would be octopodes.
Well, yeah, there's a huge debate on how to pronounce it, you know, octopuses or octopi, you know.
Octopuses is fine in English.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, despite what grammar Nazis like to say, especially the way Glove and Boots put it, there's, like, even when Glove and Boots did it, there's no universal law that says, you know, grammar has to be a specific way.
Yeah, I mean, it's all just how the language develops. Grammar should be there to help you be understood by others and help you formulate your thoughts into a clear sentence.
Like,
also, to anyone in the chat who thinks of typing it in, anime is a highly respected form of art. It was not a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who said that in the chat? I think I missed that.
I said it as a warning to anyone.
Okay.
Yeah. I think he's referring to that one meme, you know, that was making fun of that one guy who was caught with all this, you know, hentai porn, and he tried to say, no, I wasn't looking for the titties. I was looking at it because it's artwork.
Here's the interesting thing. The more sexually repressive the culture, the more interesting the porn.
Yeah.
I mean, look at some of the pictures and drawings from the Victorian era.
Oh, yeah. You know, it's pretty funny. It's pretty funny because, you know, I mean, going back to hentai, you know, I mean, hentai is really extreme, and there's all forms of it. You know, there's tentacle rape and all that, and people say, how come get to that? Well, because the thing is that personally, Japanese are very, very conservative in terms of their sexual, you know, life and all that. I mean,
actually, I think one of the things is, I think it's the law in Japan that they can't actually depict a phallus, and they would have to pixel it out. But a tentacle is not a phallus. So
yeah, that's why in a lot of Japanese, you know, anime porn, even when they're actually, you know, showing the penetration and all that, it's still censored because it's the law. Yeah.
They can sell it uncensored overseas, but in Japan,
in Japan they have to do it where, like, you can, like, it's still clear enough that you can tell what's going on, but it's still blurry. So, and I've seen some of that hentai stuff, and it's like, even if the girl's like in her late 30s, she still sounds like she's only 12 years old.
It's just, no matter what restrictions you put in, they'll find a creative way around it.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
You might as well just allow it. I mean, you know.
Yeah, it's
not like they can't download it off the internet anyway.
Yeah, it's pretty funny because, you know, I mean, so there was one lady that was criticizing hentai because based on the vocal sounds, you know, because it's like, oh, it's always about these 12-year-old girls, you know, being raped by these 50-year-old men. Then other people who actually have lived in Japan pointed out, that's kind of how Japanese men and women sound like. You know, women in Japan do naturally have a higher pitched tone, and boys, you know, in Japan and tend to have a deeper voice, you know, even, you know, compared to their age, you know, so that's just how they sound.
By the way,
one makes them sound more badass, in my honest opinion.
One more point I want to make about porn. The fact that it is still so immensely profitable should be a complete refutation of all that thing about how, oh, you know, piracy kills businesses. I mean, there are just tons of free porn all over the internet, and yet it's still profitable to make porn.
Yeah, I read that it's like it's like it's $1 billion industry, you know. And the funny,
multi-billion dollars.
And you know what's funny about pornography? I actually saw this one funny political cartoon one time where the police walk in on a couple having sex, and they're like, we hear that you were getting paid to have sex, and then the director comes on and says, yeah, it's for a porno. Oh, never mind then. Yeah, it's like okay, so paying for sex is perfectly legal as long as someone's filming it.
The weird thing about prostitution is it's got to be the only crime where both parties are both perpetrator and victim.
Yeah.
The Lickers and the Johns.
Yeah. And the funny thing, I actually saw this on Penn and Teller, the war on prostitution is actually very, very recently, because historically speaking, people didn't care about prostitution. I mean, it wasn't highly looked upon, and it wasn't ideal, and it was frowned upon, but it wasn't, banned either. It was seen as
I'm surrounded by moral busybodies.
Yeah,
it was lower class, but I mean, it's like if you look at all those depictions of Victorian times, they have all the prostitutes there on the street.
Shane, any good websites for 3D models?
Hang on. I'll answer in a second. Let me finish my point. But you had all the women out there, prostituting, street walking, in the more common areas of London. That was perfectly legal. Yeah. It was not the first law against that.
Yeah. I actually read somewhere that in some European countries, really the only law against prostitution was that you had power and you couldn't do it in an area where children might be present. But other than that, as long as it was out of sight, it was perfectly legal.
Okay, good websites for 3D models. There's free3d.com, which I think is the same as TurboSquid. TurboSquid has some free ones. If you're looking specifically for Blender, I think, what is it called? Blender Market or Blender something like that, where people share things they've done on Blender. What's another good one? I'd have to look. But yeah, there's some good ones out there for 3D models. And here's the thing. Here's an interesting thing. A lot of people, when they first get into 3D modeling and rendering in 3D art and everything, they think it's kind of a cheat to go and get a model that someone else is, like they have to do everything themselves. One of the things you notice about that is that their scenes aren't very detailed, and the pros just will not model something unless they absolutely have to. They'll go to a library, or they'll pay, $200 for this nicely detailed and textured model and just stick it in the scene. That's less work they have to do.
And DJ Arms, yes, the Catholic Church at one point did run several brothels actually all over Europe.
I wasn't aware of that.
The more you know.
Yeah, in fact, if I recall correctly, some brothels were actually operated sort of as charities because prostitution was seen as a way that an uneducated, unmarried woman could still make a little extra income for herself, because, back in those days, if you were a woman and you didn't get educated and you didn't get married, you were screwed financially for the most part.
PG Trader is another good one. But yeah, this is something else that Adam got right on Adam Ruins Everything, is how much the West was actually built by prostitutes, and prostitutes were very much empowered women, who actually ran a lot of the towns.
Oh yeah. I mean, we actually kind of see that, in a lot of, popular literature, where you see, the prostitute and the head mistress, and she will, kick out a guy who's being too rowdy. That's actually another misconception. The myth that, a prostitute is on her own and that she's a free for all. Nope. They've actually interviewed actual prostitutes, and they say we have rules, and we do tell the John, if you're going too far, we kick them. We tell them
without a refund.
Yep. No. Yep. Without a refund.
Hold on, here we go. Blender-models.com, and there's also blendswap.com. Those are another couple.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, actually, I was about to say something about the 3D modeling. You were talking about how people don't like it, like to criticize you for being unoriginal if you buy assets from other people. To which I say, well, look at video games in general. Yes, the video games artistic-wise are different, but hardware-wise, a lot of video games use the exact same engine, The
Unreal Engine.
Oh, yeah. That's a common meme, That's a common meme, when people see videos, they're like, Unreal Engine detected, but, can you blame them? From what I've read, Unreal's a very easy engine to work with, and that's why it's very popular with indie developers.
Well, do you have any idea how complicated and time-consuming it is to model and rig a human form? You don't do it. You get it from someone else, and then you reshape it how you need to.
Yeah. And, this is the thing, and it goes back to the whole copyright thing. This is why I hate it when people say, but without copyright, how can we have creativity? To which I say, listen, copyright, the people who run copyright, they don't actually pay attention to who came first, to who invented it first. They only care about who filed it first. So,
yep, same with patents.
Yep, as there's actually one person that pointed out, copyright and patents are the only systems where the creator can actually get screwed over, because if you develop this great story work and one of your friends happens to gloss across it and he notices it's not copyrighted, he can take a copyright it, and now he stole it from you, but because he filed it first, he's legally the creator.
Alexander Graham Bell did not invent the telephone. Someone else did. I forget his name. He filed for the patent, and when you file for the patent, you have to give them all the details of the invention and how it works. And then you give them like so much money, and then it's patented. Well, he couldn't afford that, and he was trying to raise the money to get it patented. In the meantime, Alexander Graham Bell got a hold of the patent, looked at it, built it, did the patent himself, paid for it, and grabbed the patent from him. And the guy was suing him, and he died before the case could come to trial, so he never got credit for inventing the telephone.
Oh, yeah.
Your history books do not tell you, by and large, who invented something, only who got the patent for it.
Same thing with Marconi and the radio. Same thing with Marconi and the radio. People say Marconi did it, but now, contrary to popular belief, Nikola Tesla didn't exactly invent it either. The radio's a little bit sketchy, but it is shown that Marconi did not invent it. In fact, he might have quote unquote borrowed the idea from another inventor.
Yeah, and apparently a lot of people are saying that all of the things that Edison is credited with inventing, he actually stole from other people.
By the way, there was actually a Jimmy Neutron episode where he brings Thomas Edison to the modern time, and all technology shuts down because I took away the father of electricity, so therefore all electricity is there. And when I'm older, I looked at it and I'm like, Jimmy, you do realize that we all use alternating current electricity, and Thomas Edison was strongly against that.
Yeah, he electrocuted an elephant to try and...
Actually, I think it was an axe murderer.
Yeah. Well, the axe murderer was the first time they used it on a person, but before that, Edison would build electric chairs, and he would electrocute animals like small dogs, and there was even a time where they used elephants to show, see, look at how vicious alternating current did. And
it would actually have been easier to electrocute them with direct current.
Oh yeah, and contrary to popular belief, the current wars weren't between Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla. It was actually between Thomas Edison and a guy called George Westinghouse, who, in my opinion, is a very underrated father of modern day electronics.
Oh yeah, he invented a light bulb before Edison, although I think someone else actually invented it before.
Because here's the thing about Nikola Tesla.
Lots of people were inventing light bulbs around that. It was just time for that invention.
Yeah, well, because here's the thing about Nikola Tesla. He was a genius. There's no denying that. But contrary to popular belief, he wasn't this guy who invented everything and everyone screwed him out. The truth is, Nikola Tesla wasn't really interested in fame. He was just a scientist who wanted to invent things just to see if he could invent them. In fact, that's the reason why he didn't get a lot of credit, for his alternating current generator, because really all he did was he invented it, showed it to a couple of people. Westinghouse came and said, "Hey, I like the idea. Do you mind if I buy the design for him?" And he's like, "Sure, go ahead, buy it. I'm not going to use it anytime soon." And that's what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tesla kept out of the limelight. He didn't want that. He just wanted to invent things just for the sake of inventing it.
Oh, here's a big one from DJ Arm 67. Why do you think time travel is a type 3 impossibility and not type 2 impossibility like Michio Kaku claims? And this goes to something I mentioned in a recent video, the P versus NP problem. Where the question is, can everything be solved in what's called polynomial time, where it scales up as a polynomial as opposed to getting exponentially harder? It looks like P does not equal NP, but it hasn't been proven. In fact, there's $1 million waiting for the guy who can prove that either it does or it doesn't. But here's the thing. If P doesn't equal NP, then encryption works, but time travel is impossible. If the only way time travel is possible is if P equals NP. And it doesn't look like it does. It's not proven, so I can't say for sure it's a type 3 impossibility, but everything in the universe looks like P is not equal to NP. And if you want to know why, I'm just trying to think of a way to explain this really quickly. Like, if you have a piece of paper, and then your future self comes and gives you a piece of paper, and you look at the edges, and it's all like torn, exactly the same. It's the same piece of paper. You look at that piece of paper, and then the idea is they're difficult to solve, but easy to check. You check it and see if it's the right answer. If it's the right answer, you write it down on the paper, go back in time and give it to yourself. If it's not, you write something else on the paper and create a paradox. And that's actually impossible. So
what?
if time travel is true, you can solve every problem in polynomial time using that method.
My brain hurt. My brain.
So I was trying to keep it simple, but basically, your future self gives you the answer, and if it's correct, you write it down on the same piece of paper. Okay. If not, you write something else down and create a paradox.
Didn't Stephen Hawking do an experiment to prove that time travel wasn't possible? Where he threw this really, really big party, and like he bought all this food and all that, and it was really good, and people said, "Wow, why wasn't I invited?" He said, because I sent the invitations the day afterwards and no one showed up. Yeah,
I don't know how big a proof that is, but there is another scientist.
Somewhere an alternate future
there is another scientist.
Head just exploded.
There is another scientist named Novikov. I forget his first name. But he came up with what's called the Novikov principle, which that whole thing about, you go back in time and kill your grandfather before he meets your grandmother, the grandfather paradox, that, according to Novikov, is mathematically impossible.
Oh yeah, it's also known as the Hitler paradox. That's why I laugh at the Red Alert series, because it's like, because the story to the Red Alert series is that Albert Einstein goes back in time and he deletes Adolf Hitler from the history textbook, but he causes a chain reaction so the Soviet Union gets power. To which I say, but wait a minute, if Hitler was deleted from history, then how would Albert Einstein know about Hitler and want to go back to stop him?
Here we are.
Here's how Novikov figured it out.
Dmitrievich Novikov.
Yeah. Here's how Novikov
probably butchered that.
And I don't know if this was Novikov's illustration or someone else's that was basing it on it, but basically, if you think of pool balls knocking around a pool table, ordinary pool balls, but two of the holes are wormholes offset by 2 seconds. So if you knock it in one hole, it comes out of the other hole 2 seconds earlier. Now, what if it knocks itself out of the way so it doesn't go in the hole, so it can come out of the other hole 2 seconds earlier to knock itself out of the way? He proved that is impossible.
Yeah.
My head still hurts.
Yeah, it's
just the pool ball version of go back in time and kill your grandfather.
Yeah, quantum mechanics, so weird. There's a lot of things that people get wrong about quantum mechanics. I was watching this one video one time, and they were talking about dark matter, and people were saying it's possible that if we just look and observe dark matter, we're actually causing it to decay because it changes when we look at it. To which I point out, you do realize that Schrodinger debunked that a long time ago. I mean, that's what.
Yeah, that's completely not how it works anyway, because observing is not you looking at something. You looking at something is passive. If you look at an object on the table in front of you, you're not doing the observing. The photons hitting it are doing the observing, and some of those photons are going into your eye. But even if you stop looking at it, those photons are still hitting it and it's still being observed.
Yeah, that's the whole thing that it was debunked about. I mean, the truth. I mean, in all honesty, I've actually heard from actual quantum mechanics scientists, it's like, it's okay if you get confused because quantum mechanics is a relatively new science. I mean, yeah, it's been around since like the 1800s, but it's still one of those things where we still haven't gotten it down yet. You know, there's still
well, they did finally do the experiments. I think a couple of years ago, the experiments that John Bell proposed, like back in the '60s, to prove quantum entanglement, and they've done those, and they have proven quantum entanglement. Einstein was wrong about that one.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, the particle accelerator and all that, they were talking about experiments that could have potentially destroyed the universe. It reminds me of this one joke I saw with the particle accelerator one time where they're like, we're gonna try to recreate the Big Bang by taking two really dense particles and slam them into each other, and it might destroy our universe. To which they say, what's the point in doing that? To which they're like, I don't know, we just want to see if we can do it.
How would that even happen? How could two particles destroy the universe?
Well, it's just a joke. It's just a joke. It's making fun of the whole trope, you know, where the scientists, you know, will do something that's clearly dangerous and something that shouldn't be done on such a grand level. But their argument is, well, it's for science, it's for progress, and that's the trope it was making fun of.
Well, I mean, there was actually things being said about the Large Hadron Collider before it came on. Is like, oh, well, I mean, it will create a black hole and suck the Earth in. It's like, okay, that's not how it works. Yeah. First of all, if it did create a black hole, that would be amazing because they would be able to study all sorts of stuff about it. Yeah. But it would be a black hole that only has the mass of two particles, and it would instantly decay. A black hole isn't something that just sucks everything up indiscriminately. Yeah, it's just the gravity. It's just gravity.
Yeah, I think they actually did create like a little micro black hole one time, but like you said, it only lasted for like a fraction of a second and it didn't affect anything.
I didn't know they'd actually achieved that. Are you sure about that?
I've heard that, yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like...
But yeah, it's like if you turned the sun... If you winked the sun out of existence and immediately replaced it with a black hole of equal mass, okay, we freeze to death, but our planet would just continue in its orbit the way it always has. It wouldn't get sucked in because it would be the same amount of mass at the same distance, therefore the same gravity.
Yeah, as one person points out, and they were discussing a lot of things about the universe, and the reason why there's still a lot of things that we don't know about the universe is because the thing that's interesting about studying the universe and how it works is that just when we think we got it something, we discover something that completely boots us around, and then we got to re-examine it, And again, black holes are a pretty good example. When black holes were first discovered, a lot of people thought they were these vortexes that sucked in everything, but it wasn't until people like Stephen Hawking thoroughly studied them and realized, actually, they're not these vortexes that suck in everything. They're just, a material that's so dense it has a stronger gravitational pull than other objects around it, so that's why it gives that appearance.
Now, what happens inside the black hole is still a different thing that everyone's trying to work out.
Yeah.
What? Sorry, brain shut
out.
No.
Go back to sleep, Johnny. Go back to sleep.
Yeah. Some people say it'll suck you in and spit you out into another dimension, where others say, nope, your particles would just all be crushed from the intense gravitational forces and you'll be dead.
Angry Froman says, I've heard the black holes form constantly around us. They're just too unstable and decay too quickly to destroy anything. I think what you're actually talking about there is virtual particles, where you have massive particles just popping up out of nowhere, and you have a particle and an antiparticle. Since they have opposite charge, they're attracted to each other, and since they're a particle and an antiparticle, they annihilate each other, and so it's as if they don't exist. But if you do something like, the Casimir effect, an experiment to separate those particles, you can detect that they exist.
Yeah, so...
English, please.
How many viewers have we lost in the last 5 minutes due to this?
How many minutes have I fell asleep? Right now we have 8 viewers.
I'm surprised.
Let me put it this way: it's now Thursday.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got jokes, Shane.
Yeah. But yeah, I do love that. I do. But yeah, I was afraid people were gonna start saying, "Go back to talking about hentai. This is boring."
Yeah, maybe. And I have no idea about traveling into another universe.
Quick, make an anime reference.
And Simon, I have no idea about traveling into another universe. I haven't read up on the theory about that.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I do not need another hour-long lecture.
Speaking.
I'm sorry you came close to learning something.
Well, you should be sorry for forcing me to take a nap halfway through that lecture.
Speaking of which, that's the reason why I hated school.
Yeah, I learned far more out of school than I did. And I'll tell you something. If I had the internet when I was a teenager, oh man, having that kind of information resource at my fingertips, I would have been unstoppable.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of this funny joke I saw one time on a cartoon where a person's like, oh, but without school, how will you learn anything? Simple, I'll just go on Google and look it up. It's like, yeah, but how can you tell which one's reliable? I'll just look at the comments, and if the majority of people are saying yes, that's true, and that's how it works, then I'll accept it.
Well, you just use your baloney detection kit. But the problem is, if you're taught something wrong in school and you were taught a lot of things wrong in school, how would you know it's the only version of everything you're getting and you're not seeing any review of it or anything?
Yeah, here's a perfect example that actually happened to me in school. I was talking to this one girl one time during lunch, and they were talking about, German, and they were talking about how to speak proper German, and their teacher used the story about how when John F. Kennedy was given the Ich bin ein Berliner speech, they said he was laughed at afterwards because he accidentally said, "I am a jelly donut," to which I said, actually, that's been debunked, and it came from a stupid source. And when I told her that, she's like, yeah, but you're not my German teacher, so how do I know you're right?
Yeah, that's not at all true. A Berliner is someone from Berlin, just like a Wiener is someone from Wien or Vienna.
Yeah. By the way, people say that because it's like, yeah, but Berliner is the name of a popular donut that's in Germany. To which I looked it up, and I'm like, yeah,
no,
that is.
Getting hungry again.
There is a type of donut pastry called a Berliner, but here's the thing: in Germany, it's not called a Berliner; it's called a Pfannkuchen, which is basically which basically means pancake.
Just like a Danish isn't called a Danish in Denmark, and Brazil nuts aren't called Brazil nuts in Brazil.
Yeah. And Chinese food isn't called Chinese food in China. It's just called food.
Yeah, Mexican food isn't called Mexican in Mexico.
Although the thing is, a lot of the food that
my hunger, Smalls.
Although the thing is, a lot of food that we consider as Chinese, you won't find in China. If you go to China and ask for sweet and sour chicken or chow mein, they're gonna look at you saying, "What?"
Yeah, chop suey, fortune cookies, those are all American. This is a fun thing. It was one of those videos where they were having Chinese people try the American versions of Chinese food. And what they were trying to show was, oh, we've just, ruined it and it's all terrible and the Chinese so much better. And most of the Chinese food actually like the American version of the Chinese food better.
I actually saw a similar BuzzFeed video like that where they had actual Mexicans try Taco Bell, and they were trying to make it, like saying like, oh yeah, Taco Bell ruined Mexican food, but the majority of people actually thought it was okay. I mean, they did comment. I mean, we don't have anything like this in Mexico, but it's pretty good.
PC Dubs.
Yeah, well, good on them for showing it when it went the other way, instead of just saying, oh, well, we're not going to do this because it didn't turn out the way we wanted. So good on them for that.
And it's so funny about how SJWs are always saying we need to have diversity and we need to share cultures. And then I'm thinking, yeah, well, then why did you shut down that one taco stand because the owners weren't Mexican?
They weren't even Mexico. There weren't any Mexicans. There weren't any Mexicans for them to take the jobs from or anything like that.
They went to Mexico and they said they learned how to do it. And it's like, they stole because they snuck in and watched them, to which a lot of people say that's kind of not exactly how it happened. That's just more of a spicy story. You know how a lot of restaurants love to have that little summary about how they discovered, how their stuff, and they usually kind of, when the actual story was probably just they decided to make this one day and it worked, But
what it came from was, they were going around and everyone was actually excited to show, these American women how we do things here in Mexico. Yes, look at this. But what they had said was that just in their blog, one of them had a throwaway line. Yeah, it was fun, peeking in the windows of another culture to see how they do things. Metaphorically, not literally going around and snooping. And they took it literally and thought they were actually, looking in windows and spying on them to see what they were doing.
Yeah. literally. That's the most hated word and all that, because people are always saying you gotta use it correctly, to which, you know, I will say this: when people say you can't use literally unless you literally mean it, to which I'm like, you've never heard of a metaphor then? And yes, literally can be used as a metaphor.
Yeah, the problem is when you use it in a context where it's not a metaphor and it sounds like you do mean it literally, and it's like, oh, what?
Yeah. To which I say, to what you said earlier, if we can understand what you're saying, then we shouldn't have to have a grammar Nazi come in.
Yeah, grammar makes it easier to form a thought into a sentence, and makes it easier for that sentence to be understood by the other. That's the point of it. And when it gets in the way of that, like I mentioned that Doctor Who novel from Stephen Moffat for Day of the Doctor. Oh man, this thing is so funny. And it's like every chapter begins with like some sort of error message or something like that. And one of them started with, so it was something like, "We do not apologize for any split infinitives because that's a stupid rule."
Oh, David, don't make me take a nap again.
Oh yeah, actually Simon Whistler from Today I Found Out did a really funny video. I forgot which grammar rule it was, but it was the idea that you can't end, you know, a sentence with a consonant or something. And she was talking about a story about how there was a snooty, you know, British teacher, you know, who taught language arts, and she took a vacation to the southern states, and one southern lady came up to her and says, "Where are y'all going?" To which she says, "I'm not even going to give you an answer. Everyone knows in the English language that you do not end a sentence with a consonant. You always end it with a vowel." To which the lady replies, "Oh, where are y'all heading, bitch?"
Hello.
I think you meant end it with a preposition.
Oh yeah, like that.
Yeah, like where is it at? Don't end a sentence with a preposition. Where's it at, asshole?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, David R. It's the chat, Johnny. It's not me. I'm gonna have to just like take your headphones off or something like that. Black holes. The Big Bang might be a white hole. Actually, Roger Penrose has an interesting idea. Mathematically, if you have any particle that's completely isolated from everything else, it will immediately spark a Big Bang. And if there's enough dark energy, then the eventual fate of our universe, the Big Rip, all the particles get torn apart from each other. Each one of those particles will spawn a new universe, according to him.
Yeah. Yeah, the truth is, people like to get depressed over like the future of the universe, but the truth is there's still debate on what's going to happen, Well,
and we're talking, several Google years from now or something like that.
I saw a funny video about that one time where this goth person was talking about, the heat death of the universe and everything's going to be black for all eternity. To which one guy replies, dude, we barely understand how our universe began, let alone how it's going to end. So,
they think like something like 100 trillion years from now.
To which the goth kid replied, dude, you are such a buzzkill.
Something like, it's not 100 trillion years from now, they think we're going to run out of neg entropy. But then at some point, all the black holes are going to explode, put their matter in, and form some new solar systems. So there might be like a second reboot to the universe.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, Shane, there's
respect.
Believe it or not, Shane, there's even some debate, about the Big Bang Theory. There's actually some scientists, and they are not creationists at all, but they actually don't believe in the Big Bang. They think that the universe existed in infinitum because they think that the Big Bang violates the first rule of thermodynamics.
Well, it began in real time, but not in imaginary time. If you plot time out on the complex number plane, when you're looking just at the real number line, it has a beginning. But if you look at the whole complex number plane, there's stuff going on in the imaginary numbers. And according to Stephen Hawking, that would make the Big Bang just an ordinary point in space-time like any other.
Yeah.
How long is a Google year compared to a Google year? Google is 10 to the power of 100. It's 1 followed by 100 zeros.
Yeah, and many people have pointed this out, that contrary to popular belief, the Big Bang doesn't explain how our universe came about. It just explained how it evolved to its current form.
Yeah, it cannot explain the exact moment where, because then t equals 0 and you're dividing by 0 and all these infinities show up and it's really messy, and no one thinks that mathematics is accurate, so it's about finding the right math.
I mean, as you pointed out, you know, on like your status in libertarian videos and all about creationism,
right, we lost one viewer.
It's like just because you know you don't know what happened doesn't mean God did it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like there's a lot of questions about it, but there's even formulations of quantum mechanics where time doesn't actually exist.
Yeah.
And but so there is no beginning or end or anything like that.
Thank you, Executioner.
Actually, Shane, I did once encounter a guy who tried to use the God of the Gaps argument. Well, granted, he wasn't using it to argue for creationism. He said he was skeptical about evolution, to which I say, well, what's skeptical about evolution? What's there to be skeptical about? And he was putting the whole thing, you know, it's like, where's the transitional sphere, you know, between the Cro-Magnons and Homo sapien? And I said, oh yeah, there's Homo erectus and what was the other one?
Homo habilis?
Yeah, Homo habilis. You know, there's like, okay, but then what's between Homo habilis and Homo erectus, Homo erectus and Homo sapien, and Homo habilis and Cro-Magnon? And he just said that. It's like, really?
There was a debate, I think it was Michael Shermer did with Dwayne Gish, and Gish was like, well, here's an ape and here's a human. You don't have the missing link. And I don't know, it might not have been Shermer, but whoever it was went up and like, oh no, you've got, you know, Ardipithecus, you got Australopithecus afarensis, Australopithecus africanus, and he put all of these different links in the lineage that he's found, and then Gish went up and pointed in between each and every one. You've got a gap there and a gap there and a gap there. So according to creationists, every discovery just creates 2 more gaps.
Yep, as they call it, the God of Gaps fallacy. Yep, and of course there's always the classic, but if humans evolved from apes, why do we still have apes?
Yeah. Executioner, I'm not sure what you mean by interior templates. There are some plugins that I think come with Blender that will give you some architecture stuff like doors and windows and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know why there's apes, but here's another thing. The United States came from, you know, formed from the British Empire. You know, came from the British Empire, yet we still have the British. So,
yep,
yeah. So, granted, that's geology and not, you know, evolution, but still, you get the idea.
Well, actually, that's political science.
Yeah, actually, that's one person tried to debunk with that. You know, he's like, that's not explaining everything. That's geology and politics, not like that. And to the point we point out is that, and that's when we have to point out, look. What we're saying is that humans, that's the biggest misconception ever. Humans did not come from apes. We came from a common ancestor.
Yeah, it's kind of like asking, you know, if I came from my great-grandfather, then why do I have cousins?
Yeah, you know, it's like, yeah, what it is that at one point, you know, some primate gave birth, you know, to a couple of offspring, and most of those offspring went on to become normal primates, but the other ones went on to be, you know, what would eventually become modern day humans. That's what we mean by that. It happens over time and gradually.
Now I know how you feel when it comes to putting up with bogosity, Shane.
Yeah. It's still sad though how so many great scientists, great minds, and really, really intelligent people who are perfect at debunking religious bullshit, yet they fall for political bullshit.
It's just amazing to me how many skeptics just turn it off when you start talking about politics, and all of the same fallacies and everything they complain about with the creationists, whoever they do.
Oh, yeah, like a perfectly good example is economics. You know, I mean, it's so sad, you know, when you see those legendary atheists, you know, talk about how look, you don't need an almighty creator and God to have life. You know, I mean, every single form of life is created spontaneously and chaotically. But the moment you bring up economy, they're like, oh, no, the free market can't work independently. It needs to have an almighty authority controlling it.
See also DJ Kirk.
Yeah, DJ Arms is... explaining those different types. This is from Michio Kaku. A type 1 is stuff that we can't do now, but we might in the near future, like the next 100 years. Type 2 is something that it's impossible for us to do, but really long term, you know, if you have a powerful enough civilization where they're only limited by the laws of physics, that's a type 2 impossibility. A type 3 impossibility is one you can't do just because it violates the laws of physics and the universe won't allow it.
Kind of like those stages of civilization.
Yeah, well, that's different. I forget who did the stages of civilization, but we're a type 0. A type 1 civilization can use the resources of a planet. Like if we really dedicated ourselves to nuclear power and we did everything with nuclear and fusion and solar and wind and geothermal and stuff like that, that would be a type 1 civilization where you don't use anything that runs out like fossil fuels. A type 2 civilization would use the entire output of the sun, and generally the idea is like a Dyson sphere, which they're actually saying is physically impossible, but similar things might be done, just where you basically build a shell around the sun and you grab every photon and use that. And then a type 3 civilization is a one that can actually get power from a black hole. And if you can get power from a black hole, you can get it from a galaxy. You can get it from anywhere in the universe. There is basically no limit to the amount of energy you have when you do that. And for a type 3 civilization, the only limitation is the laws of physics.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that.
There was another one, DJ Arms, who did the type of civilization before. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah. I think you mentioned that one time when a long time ago when we were doing the live stream and we talked about who would win a fight, the dialects versus the Borg, and a lot of people kept saying, you know, the Borg won because they can mimic and assimilate technology. But many people have pointed out the dialects are a stage, 3 civilization, and they've been around since the beginning of time. They literally can do whatever the hell they want whenever they want, provided it doesn't break the laws of physics, and the Borg can't handle that.
It's hang on, I just had it. The Kardashev scale is the one I was just talking about. Nikolai Kardashev.
Yeah, like remember that one episode you were talking about, with the dialects, just to show how technologically advanced they are. Some people ran up a really long flight of stairs because they theorized, well, the dialects don't have legs, so they can't climb the stairs. But then suddenly that same dialect comes up and he's like, I don't know what he said, but like he told them, I can get up the stairs, buddy. Basically.
I don't know how many people have looked at my little space station interior in detail, but Simon Petrikov talks about star lifting. If you look closely down there towards the bottom, there's the book Star Lifting for Dummies.
You have a space station? I thought Lord Killian had that.
Yeah. And I actually, it's a bit of a shame because I designed this cover with I might have to post the cover to the Lord Killian Facebook so y'all can see it, but it was stuff like, tear apart stars, give pieces to your friends, trap your enemies in a supernova explosion, all sorts of stuff. So
yeah,
but you can't read it on the thing because it's
speaking of skeletons. OK Go is racist against skeletons.
What?
Yeah, we're just gonna get Skeletor and Jack Skellington and all those. Yeah. We're just gonna rate
and
them.
the skull.
I don't get that episode. I don't get that episode either. It's like they're not even dead; they're just skeletons. And yeah, it's probably not as good as having flesh and blood. But if you're still alive and talking, well, it's just something you're gonna have to live with. But
and what about Papyrus or Sans from Undertale? They're skeletons.
And the whole thing ended up being a dream.
Oh, cop out!
I didn't actually get all into the ending just because I just wanted to kind of end the video and not really get into it. But he wakes up from the dream and then he decides to write, his congresswoman, and then she passes a law and she gets this cape where she's a superhero because she stopped this horrible thing from happening. Oh God, it was just if I was going to do a parody of state worship, that's basically what it would look like.
Yeah. Actually,
also,
Shane,
while we're on the subject of Lord Killian, Dapperton, why'd you have to use the anti-Bogon cannon like that? I was trying to irritate us. I'm not the. You know what? I'm gonna stop before I let my head. Okay.
I have another really important question for Lord Dapperton. How does he have a schlong that big without hurting his bitches?
It's Mr. Dapperton, actually, not Lord Dapperton.
Oh, Mr. Dapperton, yeah.
And in one of our collabs, it was revealed that was where Lord Killian hit a microphone.
Oh,
that's what made it so big, and so he's spying on him.
Yeah, but yeah. Actually,
that was actually kind of funny.
Yeah, actually, I was about to say if I could do animation and make it how it should have ended, I know the perfect way to do a how it should have ended parody of that OK Go episode. You know, the congresswoman passes the law and all skeleton rays are banned, and suddenly he gets zapped with a skeleton ray. He's like, "Wait a minute, where'd you get that? I thought those were banned." And he's like, "I don't know, some guy on the street was selling them."
Yeah, the black market.
Yeah.
And then Sans just pops in with his trombone and goes.
Yeah. I actually saw a joke like that one time where they try banning something, but then it becomes available on the black market, and a politician goes, "God damn it! How come every time us good, well-intentioned politicians try to ban something that's bad for people, the black market has to come and destroy it all?"
Because the black market no the way, my Buddha.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, it's just crazy. People, check out that thread on the Bogosity forum, forum.bogosity.tv. I made it sticky. The black market for firearms. How easy it is to manufacture like these. I mean, not even like wimpy little AR-15s. I mean, actual big, fully automatic assault rifles.
And those machines.
Even like RPGs and Stinger missiles and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and you know,
Human mentioned that setting one of those up is much easier than setting up a meth lab.
And that's another thing about OK Go is that, you know, that's in that really, really terrible song. He's talking about how we can still have skeleton rays, but let's not zap people at random and let's keep them away from places like schools and parks and all that. To which I want to say, oh yeah, and you know what's another thing schools and parks are famous for? Those are popular places where people do drugs.
Another epic failure by the writers.
One of the things they said in one of the videos was to set up something like that, I think you need at least 5 people, and it's better if you have more. And each person needs about $1,000 worth of machinist equipment. And that's it. So $5,000 and 4 of your friends and you can set one up.
I mean, here's another perfect example about how you can make a gun with basic machinist tool and it's a fully automatic weapon, the Sten gun from World War II. That weapon was extremely popular with anti-German resistance groups because you could literally make it using, you know, like there was one incident of where one of the main suppliers of the Dutch resistance was a bicycle shop owner, and he didn't have the equipment that, you know, that was specifically made for firearms. He was just using the same machines he used to manufacture bicycles, and he was using them to make barrels and stocks for the Sten guns.
Yeah, it's all the same stuff. It's just, you know, lathes and welders and just regular machinist tools.
And it's pretty funny because when I point that out, you know, one person said, "Oh, but the Sten gun wasn't a very reliable weapon." To which I'm saying that's not the point. The point is that if a person really wants to get a gun, they can find a way to get a gun.
But look at any of those little exposés where they've gone to like prisons and say, you know, show us some of the weapons that you've confiscated. They get creative making those things.
Oh yeah, especially the episode about Mythbusters when they were testing the myth that you can make a deadly crossbow out of paper. They actually went to an LA prison and they had a Hall of Fame, and they was showing this whole collection of weapons that people were making. One prison warden actually said there was an actual prisoner who built a small 9mm, you know, submachine gun using tubes, you know, he disassembled from the prison's air conditioning system.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, and they actually even show video proof that inmates have been known to make weapons, you know, out of basic stuff, including crossbows, daggers. I mean, what the hell do you think a shiv is?
Oh yeah,
a makeshift weapon.
Yeah. And you know, it's not even like, you know, like they're like, and it's not even like, you know, they're so unreliable that they break, you know, like when you touch it, they actually are pretty deadly, and there have been prisoners that have been killed with weapons like that.
Yeah, they're generally single use. You could kill one person with it, but not two. But that's the idea. You want to kill one person, and so you fashion it for that purpose.
Yeah, you know, that actually kind of reminds me about. Have you heard of the Liberator pistol, Shane?
Oh yeah, I downloaded a copy of it. I don't have a 3D printer, but I downloaded a copy just because I could.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about the Liberator from World War II. You know, I mean, a lot of gun owners,
that
one.
Yeah,
a lot of people like to criticize that gun because they claim, oh, it's really slow to reload it. It's a crappy weapon. To which I want to point out that's the thing. It's not meant to be a weapon you carry in your primary weapon. It's a weapon you carry so you sneak up on the German or Japanese occupier. You shoot him in the back of the head, then you quickly hide the body and take his gear. That's what it was for. And then the pistol, you can either keep it and use it for another opportunity, or you disassemble it and throw it into a nearby body of water and forget about it.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about the one that was several years ago.
But yeah, I know.
It was 3D printed, and you still had to add like a nail and something metal for the barrel. But I think they tried it, and they had to try it in like kind of Mythbuster style, where they fire it remotely while they're in the bunker. Yeah. And you could usually get one shot off.
Yeah.
If the gun didn't explode, but it would explode on the second one. So,
but
I mean, God, just how all these leftist politicians just completely lost their shit, and they're like, "Oh, as soon as we get metal 3D printers, this is going to happen. We need to ban 3D printers that can do metal." It's like,
actually,
they don't know how easy it is with regular machinist tools.
Yeah, and Shane, I think you also pointed out in the link in some places with tough gun laws like India and even some European countries, a very popular murder weapon is like this really crude, single shot pistol, and it's literally just a barrel that has a trigger. And as you pointed out, that's what you use it for. You sneak up on your target, you shoot him in the back of the head, then you hide the body or whatever, and then you just disassemble the weapon and throw it away and forget about it.
Yeah, I don't even think you have to disassemble it. I think you just pop it in a dumpster.
Yeah, that's the whole point. I mean, and it just goes to show, criminals, do not care what the law says, And I mean, here's the thing: even if Cruz couldn't get a hold of a gun, why could he could have just used something like a bomb? I mean, there was a guy that demonstrated, that you can make a very similar bomb similar to what Timothy McVeigh used, using chemicals that you can legally buy.
Yeah, well, that's what
we ban all chemicals now.
That was a fertilizer bomb.
Yeah,
Same with the Bat School massacre, the worst school massacre in American history. It was a fertilizer bomb.
Oh yeah, another good example that I really like is this was actually pretty funny. Was shortly after the Boston bombing, there was this petition, to ban pressure cookers, when it was revealed that they used a pressure cooker to make the bomb. And at first, I thought it was a joke and like a parody, but it turns out the people behind it were legitimate. And I'm just like, wow.
Was that the one that exploded, but basically didn't even injure anyone?
Yeah,
But I think the problem with that one was he had like put it in a dumpster or something, and it directed the explosion up.
We got a fan.
And it's pretty funny because some people counter argue. And it's pretty funny because some people counter argue and they say, well, bombs don't get that much high body count, because if you look, they're often like less than a dozen. To which I say, that's usually because when they do occur, they're often made by a person that doesn't know how to use explosives. But in the hands of the right people, oh yeah, they're really deadly.
Well, there's this thing called the Anarchist Cookbook that has been around for I don't even know how many decades. It's instructions on how to do all that with easily available materials. And DJ Arms says London is now doing knife control. Yeah, Johnny and I talked about that.
Yeah,
they talked about that.
That was the one where I made the virtual novel reference.
There is no reason for anyone to carry around a knife.
I really, really hate it when people use that kind of logic reasoning. If anything, that's a reason why, I mean, the dumbest argument I've actually heard from some people from various European countries is they're like, well, our people are peace loving and we don't need guns. To which I say, that's not an argument for gun control. If anything, that's actually a reason why you shouldn't have, restricted firearms, because if people in your country are naturally peaceful, you don't have to worry about them shooting up, because the overwhelming majority of people in your country aren't going to buy a gun and shoot it up. It's just...
Yeah, if you're peaceful, if your country is peaceful, then you don't need gun control. If your country isn't peaceful, then you don't want gun control, because you want people to be able to defend themselves.
Yep, like that.
And England, last I checked, the major metropolitan areas are not peaceful.
Oh, not even close.
Oh yeah, it's that classic. It's that classic. It's just like that old saying we say. If people are naturally good, altruistic, and kind and caring, we don't need a government. But if people are inherently evil, selfish, and dangerous beings, you don't want a government.
I think Robert Lefebvre said it like, if people are good, you don't need to have a government. If people are bad, you don't dare have one.
Yeah. Because as we pointed out, and as Milton Friedman once said, I hate it when people, as you pointed out on your quickie, I hate it when people say, oh no, we need the government. The government's not bad. We just have the wrong people in power, I mean, a perfectly good example that we use all the time. When Bush was, was president, everyone's saying how Bush was bad and we need to get someone out and get him better. And then Obama came along and everyone thought it was better. But what did
David,
Obama do?
I think Shane and I mentioned that on the podcast. I'm going off of memory here, by the way.
Oh. Well, I was just saying,
and I think I have a quickie on that.
Yeah. It's what you said. It's about the cat barking fallacy. It's where, when every time a person's, as Milton Friedman said to that one person, every time a person says, "Oh no, we need this program. We just need the right people and the right reforms in power." To which he replied, "Oh, so you're saying, you'll gladly buy a cat provided that it barks instead of meows."
Yeah, the barking cat fallacy. That's what.
Yeah, it's like you can't change the nature of the beast people.
All right, 10 minutes left. What do y'all want to talk about?
What other bogus things have
we heard? We did talk about them banning muscles and hands, and I did do this one thing. Oh, jolly good, darling. We've just passed out a background check. They can bring us on knife to eat steak with now.
Oh, yeah.
At a restaurant.
Yeah, and there was that tragic story, where that guy killed an armed robber in self-defense, and everyone's like, oh, you murdered a sweet, innocent man.
That was when I made the reference.
Yeah. You murdered an innocent man who was a serial robber.
Apparently, according to one of the commenters, the perp and his buddies were apparently Romani, and from what he was saying, it was their fellow Romani and their family members and everything that kept putting up the shrine, and so it wasn't like people all around London were like, "Oh no, how dare you!" Apparently, it was just that group of Romani.
But the London mayor, he is such a smug douche. It's like
calling him a smug prick would be an insult to smug pricks.
It's pretty funny that they're banning all these knives, and yet London is getting more violent. And there was also that infamous case where there was that rape gang that was going around, but the mayor of London told them not to properly investigate it because, we found out that the majority of them are Muslims, but we don't want to look like anti-Islam.
Coming from a guy who comes from a culture that doesn't assimilate with modern society.
Yeah.
Actually, that's kind of a myth. A lot of them do. And I mean, you just hear about the radicalized areas. And I've also talked before about how Iran was very much westernized and adopted a lot of Western values like equality for women. And they were even a little better about homosexuals than we were at the time. Yep. But then, they staged that 1953 coup. They deposed parliament and the prime minister gave the Shah ultimate power. Of course, he abused it. And that's what allowed Ayatollah Khomeini to get, because people were ignoring Khomeini before. He's this backwards guy in this little nobody sect. Who cares? But then he was able to get this resistance up and overthrow it. And then that led to the Islamic State of Iran, which we have today.
The Ayatollah Khomeini. The funny thing is that if I recall correctly, the people who started the 1979 revolution, they were actually, more left-wing and didn't want Khomeini to take over. But the problem is, just like with Saddam Hussein in Iraq, for all the sins the Shah was, he was really good at keeping the radicals out of power and making sure that nobody would listen to him. But once he was out of the picture, Ayatollah Khomeini, all he had to do was walk in and say, "Okay, I'm in charge now. Do what I say." And
it wasn't that difficult, given that he was the leader of the resistance. But I mean, how many times have we seen that the resistance overthrows the government only to create an even worse one?
Yeah,
And the U.S. had previously overthrown.
If you guys enjoy us talking about Bogosity and other random cuckery, smash that like button. Subscribe to this live stream channel. Turn on notifications. Enjoy me, Shane, and everyone else in the Bogosity podcast every Sunday.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk to us,
he promoted his own video. He's a sellout. Yeah. David Stewart did a whole video about them. The sellout fallacy. It's like,
Chris, I'm trying to help a brother out.
And I appreciate it, Johnny.
Hey.
Yeah, but I was saying that they had previously deposed the Shah's father, Reza Pahlavi, and he was very much a man who was into secular Western values. As far as he was probably a little socialist for our good, but I mean, at least he had these ideas of equality and industrialization
like Nasser, in Egypt. I mean, it's like look, I will say this: Nasser did some good things in Egypt, and he was very, very, secular. The only thing I don't like Nasser, and this is really just what makes me facepalm, is because he sounded like he was such a smart guy, but then because I read history like this and all that, then he announces, okay, we're gonna nationalize the Suez Canal, and then we're gonna take over the Straits of Tehran, which historically have been international waters. And then they say, we're not going to let certain countries do with it, hint, hint, Israel. And then it's like, okay, it's like, look, I'm not saying what Israel does is good, but when you treat them like that, how do you expect them to behave? It's like...
Yeah, but he didn't really start that fight, though. That had been going on. He was he escalated. I will knock him off points for that.
Yeah. By the way,
my main thing with Gus is just like it's the same thing I have with Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was a great guy, and I mean he did a lot. And he overthrew apartheid. Good for him. But if he just had a little more of a brain, so he didn't fall for all that socialist crap.
Yeah, people feel, it's pretty funny. It's pretty funny because one of the biggest myths about South Africa, Nelson Mandela, was that he was arrested simply because he spoke his mind, to which I point out, and he was also behind a series of bombings and assassination attempts too. That's a thing they tend to leave out. And here's a fun fact too. The pro-apartheid government, they actually were, especially towards the late 80s, were willing to negotiate reforms and allow more freedom under one condition. They just wanted the violence and terrorism to stop. But the African National Congress said, no, we want to keep up our armed campaign. It wasn't until finally Nelson Mandela finally agreed and said, okay, if you agree to the reforms, we'll stop the terrorism, that finally reforms were able to get a hold of there.
Yeah, but I mean, it's really hard to blame people in that position, because if you look at Haiti, it was formed by a slave uprising. If you look at what, they were doing during that slave uprising, they weren't being nice about it.
Yeah,
But at the same time, it's tough to blame them.
I ain't gonna lie. As much as I do love as much as I love shows like Star Wars and all that, one thing, and I think this is another problem with the Resistance in the new Disney trilogy, is that they're trying to treat it like the Resistance can do nothing wrong because they're against the evil empire. But one thing I do like is when a theme explores, the evil empire is bad, but the rebels are no better,
This is something I didn't realize about this chat at the top. It defaults to this top chat where you're not seeing it doesn't look like it filtered any out. I kind of scrolled back up, but I'll keep an eye on that in future.
Try live chat, Shane.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep it on the live chat instead of the top chat, so you see.
And Shane. Here's another little thing which it talks about. Leftism and hypocrisy is like a perfectly good example is, again, going back to some of the African rebellions. They were these rebellions, that were really violent and really cruel, but yet because they were communists, they were seen as freedom fighters. And then you have groups like the Contras, and despite the fact that the Sandinista government was in a very oppressive regime, people still view the Contras as American mercenaries. And they got some funding from the CIA, and they did do some terrible atrocities. But again, why does that make the Sandinista government any better?
Yeah, the Sandinistas were not nice people.
Yeah.
Spit on them.
Same thing with
the Sandinistas right with us.
Same thing with the whole Syria. Same thing with the whole Syria, incident. People are saying you got to pick a side, and I'm like, okay, let's see here. You either have ISIS, which doesn't need any explaining, or you have Assad, who's a megalomaniac dictator who's BFS with Vladimir Putin, who's probably the most dangerous man on the planet.
But you know, Assad, like Saddam Hussein, was actually doing a pretty good job. Maybe not as good as Saddam, but he was doing a pretty good job of fighting the terrorists, and he was trying to fight ISIS and Al Qaeda and keep them out. And then the U.S. and other countries started joining. I mean, when they say they're going to depose Assad and they're going to side with the rebels, they're siding with Al Qaeda. They're siding with ISIS. They're siding with the Muslim Brotherhood. That's who's doing that.
Now, to be fair, there are some, legitimate, Syrian resistant groups, that don't want, ISIS in power. But the problem is that they're too few, too little. A perfectly good example was, and this was a classic person who was trying to pull a no true Scotsman, was I was talking about Pol Pot's Cambodia. And they were like, oh yeah, well if the U.S. was, if the communists were the ones who backed Pol Pot, then why did Pol Pot take money from the United States? To which I pointed out that didn't occur until the Cambodian-Vietnam War, which happened after Pol Pot was disposed from power. And even then, the reason why the Khmer Rouge got that money in the first place was because the U.S. and the British government was giving money and weapons to basically anyone who claimed to be anti-Vietnamese in that conflict, and that included the Khmer Rouge. So it really wasn't a means of political support. It was just not, keeping an eye on what they're giving weapons to,
Well, and I also, in one video, I showed everyone a declassified document from 2012 when it was talking about, as they were at the time, ISI, the Islamic State of Iraq.
Yeah.
And they were only that because, Saddam got deposed and wasn't able to keep them out anymore. So they got into Iraq. That was their first foothold anywhere. And they were warning us, like, look, if we
John Wick morality.
Look, if we start attacking Syria, these guys are going to get in there and they're going to get a foothold in Levant. They warned the president not to do that, or that it would create, ISIS or ISIL or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
They warned them. They knew that, hey, if you do this, it's going to happen, and they did it anyway.
Yeah, and people are still harping on about Trump and the whole Russia thing. And it's the most cringiest thing I ever heard, Shane, was I was watching an episode of The View was on a TV one time, and they were criticizing Trump and wanting more connection with Russia, and they were like, I'm just worried that we're going to start World War III, and I'm thinking, then how the fuck is creating tensions between the United States and Russia going to stop that?
Oh,
all right, 10 o'clock, time for parting shots, everyone.
No, I want to stay up all night.
You can do that if you want, but I ain't going to be here.
Yeah.
You got jokes.
All right, I think Johnny already went through everything about hitting the like and subscribe and everything else. So I'll just say thanks to Chris and Johnny. I'm sorry that there weren't any patrons who joined us this month, but maybe next month. Well, thanks to everyone in the chat.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks to everyone.
At least there weren't any psychotic Build-A-Bear reject impressions.
Well, before I go, I just
certain someone who I'll not name names.
All right. Well, and what were you going to say, Chris?
I just have one final thing before I hang up on you guys.
Don't do it.
Not the mama. Yeah.
We'll see you next month, everyone.
Okay. Yep. See you guys.
Shine on.